Hello, everyone. My name is David Reed. Welcome to another episode of Dial the Gate. We are very fortunate to have Robert C. Cooper back with us to discuss Atlantis, its inception, his episodes, and the ending. So from beginning to end, this is a 90-minute show about Atlantis. And I really appreciate you being here for it because it is a fascinating discussion, as Robert always is. And before we get started and bringing him in here, if you like Stargate and you want to see more content like this on YouTube, it would mean a great deal to me if you click the like button. It does make a difference with YouTube's algorithm and will help the show continue to expand its audience. And please also consider sharing this video with a Stargate friend. And if you want to get notified about future episodes, click the subscribe icon. Giving the bell icon a click will notify you the moment a new video drops, and you'll get my notifications of any last-minute guest changes. This is key if you plan on watching live, and clips from this live stream will be released over the course of the next several days on the gateworld.net YouTube channel. So this is a pre-recorded episode, so Robert will not be able to take your questions in real time. This is what we have to do to accommodate his schedule, and we are more than thankful that he makes the time for us that he does. So this episode, since it's pre-taped, we won't be able to have a back and forth at the end. So the questions that you have, just keep them in mind that we're hoping to have him back for another episode, and I will give you all an advanced opportunity to ask those questions then. But with this episode, I really wanted to keep it focused specifically on a specific line of thought for Stargate Atlantis and its creation and his episode. So without further ado, let me go ahead and bring the writer, director, and executive producer of Stargate Atlantis himself, Robert C. Cooper, in with us now. Robert C. Cooper, back for his fourth appearance on Dial the Gate. I am so fortunate to have you, Robert. Every time you come on, I learn something new. You know, I thought it's at a certain point, it's like I can't learn anything more about this franchise, and it's just not true. You know, these 17 seasons, there's so much to mine, and I really want you to know how much it means to me to have you on once again.
Well, it's a lot of fun. You're a great host, so that makes it all worthwhile.
Thank you. News recently has come out that Amazon is reportedly offering a high bid for the MGM archives. So as it stands at the moment, there is a reasonable chance that Amazon may be Stargate's future home. Thoughts?
You know, we'll see. I don't, like to speculate. These things take time, and who knows whether it'll happen or not. But certainly there is a ton of very dramatic media consolidation going on across the industry, and these jumbo streamers are looking to pad their libraries and acquire IP. And like you can see that there's like an MGM subsection on Amazon Prime that you can sort of sign up for and get extra. And I guess they have data on the value of what's there, and they're just trying to take over the world. So
it seems like there is. It doesn't seem. There is definitely an enormous media consolidation occurring. I never thought we would see the day where Disney absorbed Fox. When that happened, I was like, whoa. I was really sorry. Isn't there some kind of antitrust alarm that should be going off now or something?
Yeah.
Because that, I mean, I know that they want X-Men. I get that, but and there are a few other things definitely that they were in that for. But I was like, when does this stop? When do we start spreading out a little bit more?
Well, and it's
who are in charge
it's
of all
caused this upheaval, trickle down effect, even to my level, where there's such a dramatic turnover in leadership at these companies every time one of these things happens. Is the executive shuffle. You don't know who you're dealing with.
Right.
The people at these companies don't know what they're doing. The things that they're developing suddenly, go out the window because there's a new boss in town, and there's like hierarchy shuffles, and the streamers, are kind of pivoting and trying to figure out what they are and who they're serving. And it's it's created a lot of confusion and frankly some paralysis in the business that's been, frustrating for people at my level to deal with.
And on top of that, the pandemic and everything else that's happening right now, it just feels like and this is maybe a little bit hyperbolic, but it just feels like everything's happening at once. So I mean, almost like a perfect storm.
I mean, I've heard people describe it as like we were already going through an earthquake and then a hurricane hit. You know?
Yeah, it feels that way for sure. But you know what? It won't be boring. Jeez. So,
well, I mean, I guess I just have to kind of rely on the fact that people continue to want to be entertained, and we just have to find the right avenue to get those stories to eyeballs.
Absolutely, and I don't think that there's any question that streaming is here to stay for a while until we get holodecks, at least.
Yeah, so. Or virtual reality.
Yes. That's certainly true. I am impressed that programming like the Snyder Cut and movies like Godzilla are versus Kong are appearing to achieve what they've wanted to achieve, both in theater and in the home market. I was kind of interested to see that it was going that way. I wasn't sure if these movies could, and a lot of that still remains to be seen, could recoup without having, $1 billion, opening month.
I don't pretend to understand the economics that are going on either, because I don't understand how $500 million for the Lord of the Rings series on Amazon makes financial sense. Like I don't understand from a business perspective what revenue gets attributed to that expense. Right. Or how people look at like how Netflix could pay $100 million for a feature and justify that on their balance sheet. So, there's people who are figuring that out and for whatever reason think it's worth it. But I don't know if that's sustainable.
Correct.
But I also don't think that theatrical motion pictures are going to persist in the way we've known them for the last, few decades.
Yeah, I agree. Unless there's like hyperinflation, which is always the case. I think the possibility, I think that the age of the $1 billion blockbuster, at least theatrically speaking, is over. And in situations where it comes down to like Amazon and Google, for instance, for YouTube, with the advertising partnership program, I mean, they run at a net loss, but other elements of Alphabet are able to keep that buoyant. So that's a situation where you have a larger company that's able to help other divisions in order to, keep this thing ticking.
Yeah. So. Well, we're shortly all going to be slaves to the AI anyways. So
I know. Might as well just give in now, right? No, fight the good fight. Absolutely. Stargate Atlantis, 2004. But let's go back a little bit earlier, 2002. Okay. Sci-Fi Channel agrees to pick up Stargate SG-1. And this was a big deal because 5 seasons, Showtime had only agreed to 5, and that was pretty much it. And then at some point during the 5th season, you got interests. You heard murmurs of Sci-Fi wanting to pick up the show for a 6th and I guess final season at that point, or maybe take it to more.
Oh, it was not going to be no. There was definitely hope for a longer future.
For longer? Okay.
Yeah, one there's always unsung heroes, people whose names you wouldn't know that made huge difference in the lexicon of the show. One of them is a guy named Tom Vitale. I don't know if you've heard his name before, but he was in acquisitions for Sci-Fi. So he, he liked the show, but he had also seen the value in the repeats on their air. So, I mean, at one point, this was a little later on down the line, but we were, I don't remember the exact number, so don't kill me for getting this wrong, but we were a significant portion of their airtime, their primetime airtime. So whatever their primetime was, 7 to 10, we were like 40% of their air, because they would run 4 episodes on a Monday block.
Reruns,
yeah. And then, they would run a second rerun block, I think, on Wednesday. And then they would run the Friday night. We would have, with Atlantis and SG1, when they were both in there, was 2 hours. So we were like a giant block of their, but they had data that was showing them that as long as there was a new episode coming on Friday, the rerun blocks were doing way better than when there was no new episodes on. So like they could, a ongoing show always seemed to do better in reruns than a show that had ended, because I think in their minds, and particularly with Sci-Fi, Tom used to talk about the fact that when the show was over, it was almost like the show was dead. People mourn it. They may go back to it, but it was like, it wasn't the same as the interest they had when it was alive. And there was sort of, continuing stories. So like what you were saying in a way about YouTube, the show was, the new episodes were a bit of a loss leader for the network. They were more interested in the value they were getting out of the rerun blocks. Wow. Anyway, he was the guy who was the sort of driving force behind the acquisition, and sort of saw the potential to really have Stargate and Sci-Fi kind of be a brand together.
Stargate SG1 season 6 premieres. It's a hit. By season 7, you're on the cover of TV Guide. Michael Shanks is back. Large thanks to you reaching out to him. And then at some point here, this idea that had been percolating around in the gray matter of the lexicon of Stargate, this Antarctic find in season 1 in Solitudes, there was another gate, there was history there, led to Atlantis. When did the talks for Atlantis really start in earnest?
Well, I mean, we had Brad and I had been in conversation with MGM about doing a feature. We wanted to do wanted to take it back to features. Long before Atlantis was actually even an idea. So we'd actually been paid to write a feature script. And so we were thinking about what other things we could do with the franchise outside of SG1. Pretty much, I think it was in and around season 5. So it was before 6 for sure. Mm-hmm. And yeah, and then I mean, I guess I've told this story, but I'll tell it again. Is that we pitched Atlantis originally as we were going to end SG1 at the end of season 7. The plan was to make it a handoff, so that we would resolve SG1 and then move into Atlantis. And one of the executives who was like the top decision maker for the whole sort of USA Sci-Fi world flew up to Vancouver to hear our pitch for Atlantis, and we started to explain that to her, and she was like, no, we want them both to exist concurrently.
Jeez. Aw, dang.
And we were like, oh,
Wow.
okay. So we actually had written out a plan for how to do a transition from one show to the next, and then had to rethink that. And so, the sort of the version that you end up seeing of Lost City was kind of the rewrite, so to speak, of the original idea.
Yeah, there's artwork that exists where James C.D. Robbins has Atlantis rising out of the depths of Antarctica, presumably to combat Anubis. And then, I mean, the series would likely have been set in Antarctica, I'm guessing, at that point.
There were a lot of different versions of that, flying around. There were some different, a number of different suggestions, let's put it that way.
So if they're going to be on the air simultaneously, you can't, especially for that first season, you can't be calling up SG-1. So the Pegasus Galaxy became a logical next step.
Yeah, precisely. I mean, I also felt like we wanted the new show to not feel like SG-2. We wanted it to feel very different. And we wanted to separate, not just separate physically from SG-1, because you're right, you didn't want to feel like we should just call on the other guys for help, but actually make the show look and feel very different. And while it's it's a bit silly that you had to go outside the galaxy, because galaxies are so darn big, but we really wanted to go outside the access of the current gate system, right? We wanted to make it, and just saying it's a new galaxy just felt like it was a new frontier, something that had been unexplored previously. So, and then the idea of stranding them there made it just feel a little more frontierish, which, and then of course, the new bad guys were all also the sort of on the agenda, because we had sort of beaten and battered the Gould so much that we win every time was the joke. That they just don't seem all that formidable. So we needed to come up with a new challenge that would seem, like a new mountain to climb.
And it certainly is the case that the greatest race that our galaxy has ever known was beaten by these things, not necessarily through any kind of superior intelligence, but just by raw numbers. The ancients lost, and they gave up, and they came back to Earth. What were some of the more interesting aspects of the idea that became Atlantis that you were interested in engaging in? I know Brad, at some point I remember someone had asked him, tell us about Stargate Atlantis. Well, the chevrons are blue. No longer a rotary dial.
To Brad's credit, he always, identified those very important elements that would be striking on a poster or stick in someone's mind as the iconic imagery of the show. He was also very, very intent and obsessed with the city rising up out of the ocean. That was a sequence that he was very married to, and for good reason. So I mean, that was really him, and certainly the how do we make the gate in in that world different and new and fun, and I think it did excite the fans. I mean, I think he was 100% on the money, that people were like, ooh, that's fun, that's different.
Space gates.
Yeah, space gates. Puddle Jumper.
Yeah.
You know, uh, yeah. I mean, look, I was excited about um, creating a new team. You know, and that was no easy task either. Um, you know, the magic that you see eventually on screen in SG1, the chemistry between the team and the characters, and how much fans seem to really love them, want to come back and see them in their adventures every week. That's not like, you know, you don't just snap your fingers and have that happen. So creating that dynamic again, watching that unfold and going through the you know, the casting process with the network was interesting. The writing process, I mean, I think fans probably know that McKay wasn't always part of the team.
Benjamin Ingram was his name.
Yes.
So,
so, you know, those things that happen, you know, along the way, this relative unknown guy, you may have heard of him, Jason Momoa. He was, so. You know, that was like, honestly, people were like, really, this guy? Like, honestly, we had to have arguments with people about him. And it was you know, that was stunning to me, because you just looked at him and was like, he's a thing, you know?
Yeah, that's true. And he was second season. We had Rainbow Sun Franks in season 1.
That's right. And I think that for me was the most exciting and challenging part of creating that show, was getting that chemistry right.
One of the things that Tori Higginson mentioned to me once, you know, she was shooting Rising and New Order back to back, and had said, you know, on the Atlantis set, there was an energy, especially with Rising, of something to prove. We're the new kid on the block. And then she would go over to New Order, to SG1 for New Order, and there were fart jokes, and, you know, everyone was just kind of not getting the work done, but definitely more of a chill factor there, because they were going in, they were entering the 8th season, clearly bonus territory for any, you know, by any reasonable measure.
Yeah. I mean, there's a difference between newlyweds and a you know, a well-worn marriage, shall we say.
That's exactly right. With all the bells and whistles to it. And it was a cast that was definitely a different energy from the SG1 cast. To put it mildly, there were just, and to your earlier point, there are the magic that occurred with those original 4. In many ways, will like the Next Generation cast from Star Trek. You can't duplicate it. Every cast is going to be its own energy, and every cast is going to have its own fan base attached to it.
That's true. And certainly we got flack for making changes, but I feel like some of the early lessons we learned, maybe not that early, they were, you know, seasons 3, 4, 5, whatever. We fretted over making cast changes. Like, it wasn't something that we just did, you know. We weren't just like, oh, let's just, you know, replace Michael Shanks with Jonas, you know, with the character.
Corin, yeah.
Corin Nemec. But the fact that it worked out taught us lessons that the franchise, and, you know, with certain elements of the franchise, were above that type of, you know, we weren't gonna fail for making those changes. And in fact, they made the show more interesting and better. Like, in a way, missing Daniel for a year made you appreciate him more when he came back.
Boy, was that the truth. I mean, Corin was wonderful, but that's true.
Yeah, that's not a knock against Corin or the character of Jonas. And so, you know, when a show is going as long as we did, having new chemistry, having new elements come in, having sort of challenges arise, I think we gained some confidence that, the show would go on. And, we ended up, for example, you were mentioning Tori. I mean, Tori was not originally, playing that role in Lost City. Yeah. So there were a number of times where we went through changes for various reasons, obviously bringing in, the total sort of redo in seasons 9 and 10 of SG-1. That sort of stuff is, I think, born of having maybe, survived some of the early changes and realizing that change actually can make the show maybe not better, but live longer.
In some cases, though, it does. I know no other show that successfully rebranded itself with the cast, as well as SG-1 did, other than MASH. And I think it's one of the things that Ben Browder mentioned to me, when he first went into that. And what was interesting, particularly about that, watching behind the scenes.
Well, I mean, look, we also benefited from the availability and the fact that we were able to get both Ben and Claudia, that they already had a certain chemistry, even though, obviously it was very different. We were able to recognize, hey, that might work if we put them together,
Absolutely. And, with Atlantis, one of the things that did, I think more frequently occur on its playground was the cast change lineup, for better or for worse, for whatever reasons, from one to the other. I mean, Amanda Tapping, she came in for season 4. You had the brilliant Robert Picardo for season 5. Not to say that Amanda wasn't brilliant, but I mean, wow. And it was just the structure of Atlantis did lend itself to more of an outpost feel, where people could come in and out in the story. And as Sci-Fi proves again and again, especially you did with Atlantis, come back in again later, in one form or another. So replicator or clone, or you're never really dead in science fiction. There's always a chance to come back. Yeah. So the series ran for 5 seasons, which, as you said when it ended, that is a perfectly respectable amount of time for any TV series. And with this show, you had an opportunity to stretch your creative legs further, and I want to talk about some specific episodes in it, if you don't mind. I'm looking at the list of shows that you wrote. I do want to talk about bringing the Wraith to life. Where did the idea for the Wraith come from? Did it come from trying to be a little bit less like the Gould and trying to make something more dark and malevolent, the punk rock style, the makeup, there's so many brilliant things that Atlantis brought about, and I think the Wraith was one of them. Definitely, James Robbins' designs were just extraordinary, and the effects. It's a faster paced show. Yeah,
we were looking at, well, what could be, what's a sort of tried and true mythological monster that we could adapt? Nothing is ever wholly original.
Correct.
And we just felt like space vampires was something that hadn't really been fully mined. And I thought the idea that instead of just sucking blood, they were like literally draining the essence out of you. That was just a cool image. I mean, again, Brad and I both thought, it would be a cool visual image to see someone have that life drained out of them, and that these guys are just, they're merciless in that way because that's how they live, right? Mm-hmm. Like, to them, there's a version of an alien landing on our planet going, wait a minute, you raise cattle and kill them, eat them, and you don't have any moral problem with that? And we were like, from the race perspective, it's the same thing. It's like, we don't see humans as anything other than just food. So that was sort of the conversation that led to that. And then the structure of them and the various types of Wraith, and obviously the eventual sort of revelation of the Queen and the hive type sort of social structure, just sort of snowballed out from that original conversation. They were space vampires.
It's interesting because the scariest single, and I'm going to take a moment to fanboy here, the scariest single image in that entire show, in my opinion, was one that you devised. There's a shot, and I don't know why, but it just gives me the heebie-jeebies. There is a shot in Sateda where the village leader's daughter is on the ground, and she is being taken by a Wraith drone. And it's just one of the creepiest moments of the entire show, because we were just introduced to this character a few episodes earlier, and you have this young girl being assaulted, her life being drained out. It's blink and you'll miss it, and it's just like, ugh, you know. I mean,
yeah, and some of that, some of that is, I think, how it was shot. You know, I think there was this sort of energy to that episode. You know, again, unsung heroes. You know, Brenton Spencer was the DP on that. Our camera operator was unbelievable on that episode. You know, they brought a tremendous amount of to the table, and I can't take credit for it. But we just had fun with doing stuff differently, stylistically. That, yeah, I mean, look, in those types of battles where it's like mass amounts of people just getting killed, it's always worthwhile to stop and try and humanize those moments so that they mean something more than just, you know, what feels like a video game of mowing people down. You know, like I think you want to sort of portray the real sort of tragedy of it. And look, I always liked, with my episodes when I was directing, I was always looking for what could I do that was different, that would make the show, that episode, look and feel different from the show. Not that it didn't end up being an episode of Atlantis, but I just wanted to, and then, you know, some of the other directors would get mad at me sometimes because they'd be like, I didn't know I was allowed to do that.
Sateda, I've been looking forward to talking with you about Sateda. This is your second episode as director. Yes, Unending hadn't aired yet. The Unending was later. This is your first action episode. This is probably the action episode. It feels like a feature. I don't know how you shot it in the time that you did. And we had a lot more. Like
we had 10 days to shoot that. We normally would shoot an episode in 7.5.
So you shot it. Okay. Tell us about this episode.
I was being greedy executive producer. Look, one of the lessons you learn, you know, being an executive producer, is that, you know, look, with all due respect to directors, it's a lot about what you're putting in front of the camera, right? Like, and yeah, they have to do a good job and shoot it right, but a lot of times directors lose that battle in the production process. You know, I need this, I need that, I want these many extras, I want to do this shot with a drone, or I want to do this shot with a crane, and it gets cut. So again, it's not fair because, you know, as the executive producer, I mean, obviously I have a studio and a network to answer to, but I can also go, I'm gonna pull some of these resources over here, and I'm gonna put them in my show to make my show look better. So as a director, I had those, the time and those tools to play with. Um, and again, like I said, some of the other directors would kind of grumble at me.
Well, I mean, I would say look at the result, and look at the result of that episode. It's one of the finest hours of Atlantis, and in no small part to Jason Momoa's performance. He had been with the show for a year at this point. There was a story to be told there that was obviously waiting to be told, was what happened before the team met up with him, and we get to see this carried out. We get to actually see the Wraith who was responsible for exterminating his people. Jason Momoa, I mean, he said, and I quote, "It was such an honor when he wrote it." That's what he told us in his trailer, at the time. It was such an honor when you wrote this episode. And
well, he had not had an episode built around him,
right?
And I thought it was important, with the exception of maybe Runner, which was his introduction. Mm-hmm. He had not really sort of had a featured role. So I really felt like I wanted to showcase that character and, show you everything that Jason could do.
And how was it directing him? What was
amazing.
Working through that process with him?
Yeah. I mean, he was just, anything you want to do. We had, there was one time where we were racing the clock, and we were just needed to be out of the sets we were in, and I wanted the shot of him doing the two guns as he flew across the hallway. And Breton, bless his heart, was like, had no time to light that, like no time. It was just throw a light on, and you can kind of see it. It's just this whitewash of light that we tried to fix later, but it was like, get the shot or don't get the shot. And he did it once, and he was hurting. Like, a lot of this stuff is hard on your body. Like, he did a lot of his own stuff. He's wearing this hard plastic and leather stuff all over him, and they had padding inside some of it and whatever, but he's still launching himself across the hall onto a very hard floor. And he was like, I don't think I can do that again. And I was like, well, I'm going to tell you that it didn't look perfect, but I'm willing to go with it, or we could try and do one more and get it right. And I said something to him that was meant to be just a fun challenge. And it was a sort of inappropriate thing to say. And he just looked at me, and I was like, oh shit, I just said something I shouldn't have said to Jason Momoa. and it was, I was basically trying to say, another guy, like a real stuntman, would do it. Anyway, he got up and he did it again, and it looked amazing.
Wow.
But that's the one we used in the show. But he was not too happy. And I think later that year, like, he remembered it in his head. And later that year, when we were done the show, we were at a wrap party, and he picked me up and hugged me and squeezed me so hard I thought every bone in my body was going to break. And I'm fairly certain that was him remembering that moment when I made him do that shot again. But look, he's great. He deserves every bit of success he's had since then. I had no doubt that he was a star when I first saw him. And I mean, his acting has frankly come a long way. Not to say that there was, it was bad when he was with us. It's just he's done a ton of work on it, and he's,
He's also had a lot of room. He's also had a lot of opportunities to grow
Yeah.
as well. You know, that has a lot to play with as well.
Yeah. So I mean, look, that show is that show was amazing. We shot with 5 different mediums, like 5 different cameras and 5 different types of film. We actually shot some stuff with Super 8 and
Really?
a Bolex. That was a hand crank.
Okay,
Bolex.
I know what. Yeah.
Some of the memory stuff, the war stuff. You know, we shot with our HD video. We shot some with film. It was we shot with a high-speed camera. Like it was just like, let's do everything. Brandon Spencer had this hand crank Bolex. He's like, can I bring that? Can we shoot some stuff with that? And I was like, sure, let's give it a try. Yeah, there was actually one sequence where I lost hearing for about 3 days because of the explosions that we were doing. I was not listening to the, this is before I actually went deaf in one ear, but I was not listening to the you know, safety advisors, and you're supposed to have your mouth open when you're near an explosion to allow your ears to, I don't know the science behind it, but and I was on my way home that night from having shot. We had done those big explosions when the puddle jumper is taking off.
Yes.
And I was like, there's something wrong with my car radio, because I was like trying to tune. I could only hear out of one side, one speaker. I was like, oh, there's something wrong with this. And then I got home and I got a phone call, and I put my phone up to my ear and I was like, that's crazy. What? My phone's not working. Until I switched ears and realized I couldn't hear out of my ear.
It's you.
Yeah, it was me. So yeah, anyway, it's wasn't that big a deal, but my hearing came back. But it was yeah, that show was just a ton of fun, but also a ton of work. You know, it rained almost the entire time. There's some great photos I can send you of us in our rain gear trying to shoot some of those fight sequences outside.
The episode is so atmospheric. You know, the nice thing about the rain, you know, as much of a pain in the ass as it is for all of you working in it, is it creates just some of the most beautiful imagery. It looks amazing. You know, the village.
It's not like a light drizzle. This was like downpours, and the crew is you know, amazing.
They can pull it off. You know, and you can watch Stargate, and from episode to episode, from one shot to another, if there's like two people talking, it's raining in one shot and it's not raining in, and you could see the lighting was dialed in such a way to make it as obscure as possible, or in some circumstances you can hear it. Okay, we're not going to be able to get away with this one. It's just had the sound of rain, and so it is in this scene. You know, you had to make it work. One of the things that I wanted to go back to before we go too far from it, Joel Goldsmith redesigned much of the sound, or maybe should I say solidified the sound of the Wraith in Sateda, with a lot of percussion, with a lot of, my musical jargon is lacking, but
mine's awful. I used to joke with Joel all the time. I would be like, I can't speak music,
right? Exactly.
I'm going to tell you the feeling I want, and you're going to somehow figure that out musically. But I'm not.
That's his job.
Yeah, I mean, Brad's amazing. He knows how to read music, and he knows to speak the language of music. Me, I'm a musical idiot. I just know what I like to hear.
Exactly. And he made this sound for the Wraith that was exciting, that was threatening, that had these almost electronic kind of components to it, in addition to the percussion and these long, you know, he really went above and beyond in this episode for you, and it's just one of the greatest pieces of music to listen to, watching Jason Momoa kick ass.
He is Joel was a genius. Again, you know, you speak about unsung heroes. I mean, he got a lot of credit, but he never got nearly as much credit as he deserved for all the score that he did for all three shows.
Agreed. Doppelganger. remember visiting you on set for the, not on set, but in the production offices for this one. And I talking about nightmares and the things that frighten us, like to our core, the things that influence us when we are young. And you took a lot of the imagery that, you know, really pulled at you when you were a younger person and put it into this very effective show.
Yeah, I mean, the episode where everybody has to face their greatest fears is a bit of a sci-fi trope.
Yeah.
You know, like, it's been done a lot. So I guess, you know, you have that argument in the writer's room about, are we going to go there? Are we going to do this? And then it becomes, well, you know, if we did this, what would it look like? What would those elements be? And then you sort of, based on that, decide whether it's gonna, you know, it's worth it. So yeah, I mean, I think you know, beyond the everybody's greatest fear element of it, the thing that's sort of stuck out for me in that episode was the way it was the sort of the Shepard McKay relationship. Beats were really worth exploring. You know, that was something that I felt was fun to sort of play with.
Do you hate clowns, Robert?
Who doesn't hate clowns?
I grew up with Curry's interpretation of Pennywise, so I definitely am not a big fan.
Reading that book was pretty formative for me. I mean, I didn't, you know, I wasn't so much into horror movies, but I actually read quite a bit of Stephen King when I was younger. And,
it is terrifying. I read it years later, and it was 1,200 pages of just mayhem. But, you know, and the idea of being buried alive, you know, which I think is the only, when I watched that episode, it's the only scene that I wish, you know, I wish that hole was deeper, because I think it would have made it more intense. But the imagery.
You know what? It's like these things, you say that, it's a fair statement. The things that you have to deal with as a producer, finding a place in Vancouver where you can shoot that looks like it's the wilderness and that you can dig a hole is virtually impossible.
Really?
Yeah.
Jeez.
Yeah. Like, you're not allowed to dig in a lot of these places. There was a one time when we were shooting, and it was right near the lake. So I think it may have been actually that episode, now that you bring it up. That lake where McKay is rowing the boat out.
Yes.
And we were shooting in and around the forest, married to that sequence. And you literally could not walk off the path. Like, you know, if someone stepped on a plant that was off the beaten path, it was like alarms would go off, and the rangers would come and take you away. So finding a place where you could actually dig, and not, like, in a lot of cases on other episodes as well, we would have to fake the hole. So we could put a mound of dirt,
right,
but we couldn't actually dig down into. It was very rare that you could find a location where you could bring in a digger and actually make a hole.
I wonder if you could have pulled it off at a cemetery. That would have been creepy.
Yeah, hard to get a permit.
Okay, that's a fair point. All right, very good.
Yeah, there's a lot of things that, you know, you type on the page as the writer, and you go, well, this is no big deal, and then you get to the rubber hits the road, and it's like, it's a much bigger deal than I thought it was going to be.
I'm being thwarted by a hole in the ground. All right,
Exactly.
Very good. Did you get any pushback from the network here or in any other circumstance while I've raised the question Uh, Iratus bug coming out of Taylor's stomach. Blood. You may want to dial that back a little bit. My jaw hit the floor when I saw that scene. I was like, oh man, they went there, guts and all.
Yeah. Well, I don't know. Nobody ever said anything about that. I mean, if it had been a real operation or a real thing, I think we would have got pushback.
But because like not in a dream.
Yeah, well, or even the fact that it's an alien, like the fact that it's not real.
Yeah.
Gave us a lot of license at times. So, blood wasn't really a problem if it was like alien blood,
okay,
or human blood, but in with an alien,
okay,
involved. So no one ever objected to that really. And I'm sure you noticed the vertigo shot that was the only, like, obviously I've told the story that Jaws was, even though it's a whale in Doppelganger, I still wanted to nod to Jaws, and so there's the push in on Jewel is the zoom dolly, which is known as the vertigo shot, but is also in fairly famously in Jaws.
Yes, I remember you talking about how Jaws had been hugely impactful for you as a child. I mean, you wouldn't go into like the water or something at a certain point after seeing this film.
I'm going in the pool.
There'll be sharks in there.
And you think that's silly.
No, I don't, my friend. I'm laughing out of frustration.
Have you ever seen Thunderball? I mean, I only needed to see like a couple of frames of that, and I was like, all right, that's it. Pools are out.
No. You're talking to someone who should have gone into major psychotherapy after being 8 years old, and for whatever reason, when you're really sick, your immune system is down, things affect you differently. Watching the nuclear apocalypse scene in Terminator 2 and have it completely rewiring your brain for like 2 years. So believe me, I get it. You have to exercise those demons however you can. And even as an adult, getting to do that on your show has got to be just fascinating to go through. So, and using Joe Flanagan's Shepard as a lens to kind of do that, and calling back to a cousin species from season 1 of SG-1, the Crystals. It was great. You made it happen.
Thank you.
It's a good show. Vegas.
We can talk for an hour about Vegas. So.
Let's get into it. Very different Atlantis. Almost like it was almost like it was trying to, like, you were wanting to do something other than Stargate for an episode, to have like an Atlantis episode that was outside of itself, and then marry that with it, dovetail it in an interesting way with the series finale, where the narrative kind of falls ass backwards into the problem of the next show, which was fascinating. But whose idea? I'm guessing it was your idea to take the show to Nevada. Yeah, I mean,
we on the show, a lot of the producers love to go to Vegas on our golf trips and have some fun, and I just wanted to do something special for the end. Like, it was, I didn't want to take away from what everybody was planning for the finale and the story and the wrap up, but I still wanted to do something that was going to be a little bit different and fun. And
in pre-production, did you know that the show was already over at this point? Did you know that it wasn't coming back for a?
Yeah.
Okay, so at this point, you knew.
Yeah. I've always had I love poker, and I actually written some things about poker, and I just was like, I'd love to see Shepard in a poker game with a Wraith. I mean,
and Charlie Cohen and Joel Goldsmith.
Seemed like a strange place to start an episode. But you know, I just felt like Vegas was a fun opportunity. And you know, I talked to the Charlie Cohen, one of those other sort of names, unsung heroes. He was one of our champions on the studio side.
Yes.
And you know, we had sort of run a budget on what it was going to cost to shoot the episode, and I did that before I wrote it because I wanted to make sure we could do it.
Yeah.
And called Charlie up and said, "Look, here's what it's going to cost." And he didn't blink. He literally, I threw out the number, and his immediate response was, "Can I be in it?" So that was Charlie. And so he's actually at the poker table. And yeah, I mean, look, I liked the idea of throwing fans of a long-running show completely for a loop to the point where they thought they had turned on the wrong show. You know, like that was, I had never seen that done before. Like, and I was looking for something to do that hadn't been done before. And it was like, what if this show was not this show for one episode, or at least the start of one episode, and then slowly became the show? And that was the idea. So at the time, I mean, all the CSIs were on TV and were kind of very popular, and I wasn't entirely sure I understood that. And they had such a sort of fantasy world aesthetic to them. Like there was nothing about them that looked real. They were just, you know, supernatural shows. Even the idea that these, you know, people who worked for crime scene investigators were doing the things that they were doing was so, you know, ridiculous. I don't, you know, all the power to them and the success they had.
It's definitely its own thing.
Yeah, but it was fast. I studied it pretty carefully for a long time. I had our DPs look at it. I had our editor look at it, and a guy named Mike Banis, who cut that episode, phenomenal editor for us. So yeah, we basically were like, this is CSI Atlantis, and it, you know, it plays out alternate reality. We're in a story, we don't really understand why, and then slowly we start to figure out, oh, this is the reason, you know, and that's the whole, ultimately the whole key to alternate reality stories is not that we're going to necessarily be fully invested in what that alternate reality version of Shepard is up to, but what is the key piece of information that we, our heroes, our regular heroes, can get and benefit from.
The episode makes it look as though you guys had the run of the strip. I mean, you're out there, you're in the thick of it.
Yeah, and you know, we didn't. The wonderful people at the Planet Hollywood did give us pretty much the run of their hotel, and the way it works is, when you're on Planet Hollywood, we were stunned by this when we were in pre-production and doing our sort of work with them, and we were like, okay, where can we shoot? And they're like, oh, well, you can shoot here. And we're like, wait, but this is the strip. And they're like, yeah, but we own this little piece of the strip that's right out in front. And I'm like, yeah, but what about all the people? And like, you can point your camera anywhere you want.
Yeah, it's probably a city regulation like in New York.
Right. And so we just had, you know, Todd go walk down the street in his Wraith makeup. Nobody looks twice. It's Vegas, you know, like what's that all about? You know, I don't know how many tens of thousands of people there were on the street.
Neil Jackson will blend right in.
Yeah. And he walked in with, you know, anyway, same went for the casino. We had a section of the casino roped off that we were shooting in, and we had like signs up that said, you know, obviously, please don't ruin things for us. Or if you're walking in this area, you're going to be on camera. But yeah, I mean, we could just shoot we would just point the camera anywhere we wanted.
How? Obvious question, Robert. How did you guys not secure the MGM Grand? I mean, I figured that would be the one opportunity.
Well, that would seem obvious to everyone, including us at first, until it was made clear to us that MGM Grand and MGM Studios are not the same company.
At all?
So, not really.
Yeah.
They're completely separate entities. And
I think that they would have extended an olive branch.
Yeah, no, not really.
Wow. God.
No, and you know, there's like, it was weird. There were not that many options for us because these companies are obviously very concerned about their brands.
Mm-hmm.
And part of the reason it worked for Planet Hollywood is because we were a TV show and they're a sort of entertainment
that's true
centric brand. But like having a gun battle or an illegal poker game or whatever, someone jumping off the roof was not something these other companies wanted anything to do with. So there were a few options that we had narrowed it down to. But ultimately, you know, Planet Hollywood was the one that was making us sort of the best offer in terms of what we could do there. There's so many stories related to that episode. I mean, one I don't think I've told before publicly was that we had a stunt that was, you know, human being jumping 9 stories off a roof. And by the way, those 2 days that we shot there were the 2 longest days I've ever shot in my entire career consecutively. I think we did because it was like overtime be damned. If we didn't get our footage in those 2 days, we were going home. So I think we shot a 16 and a 17-hour day back to back.
It doesn't look like you shot it in 2 days. It looks like you shot it in 4 or 5.
Well, some of the desert stuff was actually not shot in Nevada.
Okay.
The desert stuff was shot in the interior of BC. There's a little strip of desert that is the northernmost tip of the Mojave.
Wow.
And it actually is like a little piece of desert. And that there's a behind the scenes, I think, that's on the DVDs. Where we're shooting there and a sandstorm blows up. It was like the craziest thing. We're in the middle of BC and we're in a desert in a sandstorm, and we had to shut shooting down for a while.
Wow.
You couldn't see. I was pulling sand out of my ears for weeks. It was anyway. So we're shooting late at night. Everyone's exhausted. We're in Nevada. We're like running on God knows what our number of hours were on that day, and we're doing a stunt where a guy's jumping 9 stories off of the top of a building into. It was tricky because it was an alley, a narrow alley, and so you could only put so big a bag at the bottom, right? Because there's just not enough room for the type of bag you might normally need for that height. Like, again, you can't think of all the logistics you have to go through in these types of situations. So he had to hit a pretty small target, and they wanted to do it. They wanted to do it once so that he could just rehearse it, like just without, I guess, acting. I don't know. I was like, can't we just shoot the rehearsal? Like, no, we want to do one just to make sure it's all going to work and everything. I mean, I don't know what you do when it doesn't work on the rehearsal.
Yeah, no kidding.
But
next actor, please.
Yeah, exactly.
Jeez.
So we ran it one time. It went pretty smoothly, but then we were starting to run out of time. And
I want to iterate once more. How many stories?
9 stories.
9 stories off of Planet
Hollywood. Yeah, jumping off the parking garage, and we had 5 cameras running, and it was all being shot on film. This is the olden days. We were shooting 35 millimeter film. We shot Atlantis on digital, but we had decided to shoot film down there. It had to do with cameras and accessibility and really how we were going to get our footage back, process it down there, and then get it up north. We ended up going with 35. I think DPs always love a good reason to shoot 35mm film. It's like,
it looks great.
Logistically, maybe it would have worked to have our digital cameras down there, but at the end of the day, we decided we'll shoot 35. We had five or six cameras rolling. Crew that we weren't all that used to. We were able to bring some people down, but this was a local crew we were using. And the stunt goes off amazing, like just amazing. It looks great. And I remember looking over to the A camera operator, and he comes out from under his little hood there next to it. And I like look at him and I'm like, and he's like this. He's like, yeah, it's good. It's good. And we get back to Vancouver, and I think it was a day or two later. I remember Carrie McDowell, our post supervisor, comes up to me with this look of pure white terror on her face, and says, "You know the stunt?" And I said, "Yeah." She said, "We didn't get the A camera." I said, "What do you mean we didn't get the A camera?" She says, "They don't know what happened, but the film ran out." And I said, "How in the world?" Like, you have to understand that a 35mm camera has tremendous amount of insulation around it, because it's almost impossible not to hear the mag. Like, it's just this noisy thing that's happening as the film runs through the camera.
Weren't you filming at twice speed too on A camera?
I think so.
So it's ultra loud on top of it.
Ultra loud. So this guy literally is under a hood, has his ear up against the film camera, and he didn't hear that it had run out for some reason.
Or not my problem.
Yeah,
see ya.
Exactly. Time to punch out. We're already 2 hours of overtime. So the shot you see, fortunately, we had a second hero camera that is really not bad. And obviously the other cameras were rolling, but it wasn't the one that was the hero, right. The hero shot in the show. But those are just, that's just the sort of, in a feature, you probably go back and reshoot it, or having at least had the opportunity to wait at the location until your film gets developed to make sure you have the footage you went all that way and spent all that money to get.
And the stunt guy risked his life for.
Yeah, exactly.
James Bamford was pissed when he told this story. It was like, at least he's putting his life on the line, guys. At least film it. At least you can do is shoot it if he dies.
Exactly.
So, geez.
Well, we have some coverage of it.
Well, yeah, but you don't get the impression that it's as grand as it is. I mean, to be perfectly honest, it's one of those where you listen to the commentary and it's like, so let me just tell you how good this really is. And it's
supposed to be. Yeah.
Right. It's like finding out that Corin Nimmick, did his underwater sequence in one breath. It's like, because, the camera had to cut because of certain things on the screen. It's like, wow. Was this episode, what did you hit the budget that you wanted to hit for it, or were there some things that when you got down you couldn't do?
We had an overage that the overage was approved, and we did it in that number. And I know Charlie was real happy about his cameo.
He looks great.
Yeah.
And Joel's great. And I mean, I keep forgetting the name of the two actors because I'm not into that genre, but the dialogue about the finger, I mean, that was just funny.
Yeah. It's
lose a finger.
It was kind of a thrill to work with those guys too from The Sopranos.
Wow.
Steve Scialippo was one of them, and it's one of my favorites. I got to do stuff. The kind of stuff I'm not sure I'll ever get to do again, where I can just basically say, this is something I've always dreamed of doing. And then I get to go out and do it, I'd love to shoot a show where, high stakes poker game between our hero and an alien and two real poker players and a couple of guys from The Sopranos.
Correct.
And then I want one of them to jump off a roof, and, it was yeah, more fun than I deserve.
Hey, your circus, your monkeys.
Yeah.
You know, you can pull that off. The technical achievements of Atlantis, you know, in addition to everything else that you guys did. The one irritation for me about modern digital, and this is a conversation that Bruce Woloshin and I had talked about before Atlantis was even really started. The nice thing about film is you can tune explosions, so you get all the color out of it, you know. And with digital, it's yellow and white, and what you film is what you get, you know. And Atlantis had a lot of the more practical explosions on the show, and with digital, it only looks so good. What you shoot is what you
and our digital was like, that was the early years of adoption, and the first, actually, forgive me, I don't remember what season we switched over, but I think it was the first 2 years of Atlantis were shot on not even full HD cameras.
Okay.
Like the resolution was not very good. Like you can see, and you know, there are all kinds of things that you know, obviously if I could go back and do it again, the early days of Atlantis, the budget was shockingly small. Like the budget for SG1 was a little bigger, but that was just naturally because it had gone on for so long, and you know, you just pay people more the longer the show goes. So the actual salaries were higher for crew and everyone across the board. But Atlantis was a real challenge, particularly in the first year. Once it kind of got its legs and people saw it was doing well, we got a little bit more. But yeah, I mean, you know, there are lots of things I would love to have, you know, done differently.
I remember being there with you guys for season 2, and you had talked about season 1 where it's like, we're supposed to be in this grand city and there's just walls, you know, can't I have a window, you know, can't I see something? Build a model out there or something, you know, put a curtain over it.
Did the ancients not have furniture, or did they not sit down?
Those ancients, man, they had no time to sit. They were too busy causing trouble throughout the galaxy. Jeez.
Yeah. And I think, you know, there were aspects to digital that took a while. It took a long time for DPs to get used to lighting it in the same way. Like you had a contrast range on film that, you know, you could light someone at this light and then let the background fall off, whereas digital just didn't have that play in it. And so you always saw things that you didn't want to see. Things to me looked more like sets, you know, like you could make a set feel more real on film than it felt like we were, you know, in the early days, I was always very cognizant of it. It's like, well, why does that look so much like a set?
Right. And I imagine Unspeakable, did you shoot that on film or digital as well?
No, that was digital, but digital is, you know, I'm not gonna look. There's people who are gonna shoot me for saying it's better than film now, but you know, the new cameras and the new digital range is in the hands of the right artist is amazing.
Exactly. I'm looking at the up-resed versions of SG1 seasons 1 through 7 that are now available on Blu-ray. I mean, I just, if I was the wealthiest person in the world, I would go to MGM with a budget and say, okay, I've got, you know, 2 or 3 million, let's do it. But I mean, it is what it is. I'm so thankful that you guys shot widescreen from the beginning with SG1 because you did future-proof it.
Yeah, I mean, we did and we didn't. I mean, we had to TV safe it so that everything had to happen inside that box, so you don't get the same, the same sort of framing that you would get if you were thinking of shooting it like a movie. You know, unfortunately, it's still what's on the edges is still empty space to some extent. But yeah, I mean, it should all exist in that form. I've seen a lot of still, you know, 4x3 versions of it out there.
Oh, for sure, absolutely. But at least we've got, for fans who are interested in finding it, they can. It's just frustrating. Like even on Netflix, I think there's in some instances 4x3 seasons, and it's like, come on, guys, these things exist. You know, we're all watching on these now. So
yeah,
for crying out loud.
It's funny you mentioned Unspeakable, and the funny thing about that is we shot on these cameras that are, beautiful movie cinematic cameras, and we actually made it look shitty on purpose because it was supposed to be set in the 80s when everything we wanted it to look like TV in the 80s because it was like news footage and the reality of it. So we actually degraded everything in that case.
But you have the ability to now. That's the point.
Yeah, you have the latitude. Yeah, we were definitely working with. We were early adopters on Atlantis, and we were struggling a little bit.
Well, go and look at an episode like The Siege Part 2, where it's Baghdad at night. Basically, it's still one of the most incredible sequences. Rainmaker, you guys, like Brad said, we spent some money, so it's a you guys got some really great.
Not
stuff
as much as they spend now. I mean,
well,
when you think about the relative budget of
what
Atlantis was, even if you, accounted for inflation and time, take an episode of, Falcon and the Winter Soldier, it just doesn't.
Well, and also the resources of the mouse. I mean, you're right. That is they are putting a feature film image on every one of those episodes, and they have the money and resources and the time to do it as well. They're, if it's going to take, I mean, I don't say that they're saying, take it as long as it's going to take, but it sure does look like they're taking their time with it. And, if and when I emphasize the when Stargate comes back in whatever form that it's going to come back in, I can't imagine what the next version of it is going to look like.
Yeah.
With these cameras and everything else that's come out now, it's just so impressive. I mean, I look at this little ship right here. It looks like a chevron. The shots that you pulled off with that in universe, it makes Atlantis look like it was 5 or 6 years earlier. And I don't know how you did it. Some of those shots are just extraordinary.
Yeah, like lessons learned and finding the right people to execute, that sort of thing. That really helps.
Absolutely.
But even just like 1 year sometimes makes a huge difference in terms of the leap of what the technology is capable of.
I'm sure there were times where it's like, what? I really wish we had this just a couple of years ago when I did X, Y, or Z. This would have really come in handy.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I had a couple of questions before I let you go. I know you have a hard out in just a couple of minutes here, but I was talking online with some fans, and someone had raised an interesting question, and I just wanted to take a left turn and run this by you here. Someone had said online, for Threads, when you have Jim continually coming into the Astral Diner and his cup of coffee is empty. He's always needing more coffee and asking Oma to serve him more coffee. It's like, someone asked, why is his cup of coffee always empty? And I responded, I think it's a metaphor for just not being satiated. I think that there's a lot of stuff going on in that diner. If you kind of read, but not necessarily so much, but like if you kind of read between the lines, you've got Oma running around left and right serving everybody, and you've got these others just kind of sitting around, just lounging in their astral chillness, Do you think that that's a fair interpretation about the cup of coffee?
I honestly wish I remembered it more clearly and better. I think, one of the, first of all, actors always look for business. They want business to play. And sometimes it's just a matter of having a quirk or something that will get your attention. So not to devalue the meaning of it entirely, but I do think sometimes there are things that just come up that are, how about if I do this? And it's like, sure, why not? But in that case, I think there was a sort of an intent to show a passage of time, and the nature of the magical bottomless pit of what is available to you if you have that kind of power. You know, like, I think that's what was sort of we were thinking about when we did that, but I could be making that up too.
Was it true in that was it true that that you had wanted John Goodman for that role? George Zunza ended up playing Jim.
I love him, and he was phenomenal. Sometimes when you're casting or just writing, you just if someone is in your head, you have an image of something, a presence that someone conveys, a certain actor conveys, that you just want to get across. And if I said that, or if that came out somehow in a conversation, I might have said he's like John Goodman, or wouldn't it be great if we had John Goodman, that sort of thing. That's just because when you're writing, you're like, that's the kind of character I have in my head when I'm picturing who it is.
Got it. Doesn't necessarily mean he was approached.
Yeah, correct. Well, I don't honestly, I don't remember, but
okay.
I was thrilled to get George.
Absolutely. This has been, as always, Robert, a treat, and I'm really thankful to have you back on the show. It was great to take some time.
Well, it's certainly mental calisthenics for me.
Absolutely.
Stuff that happened so long ago.
Ditch the ginkgo. Come on my show. You got it. It's a pleasure, sir, and I look forward to hopefully having you back again later this year.
All right. Well, it's always a pleasure talking to you.
Thanks so much to Robert C. Cooper for joining us in this very special episode of Dial the Gate. I hope you found that discussion as fascinating as I did. Robert always has interesting stories to tell, and it is my singular delight that he continues to come back and join us episode after episode. If you enjoyed that show, please consider clicking the like button, leaving a comment, sharing this with a fellow Stargate friend. It does make a difference with YouTube's algorithm in sorting new episodes, new channels to other users out there who it recognizes are Stargate fans. So please consider doing that, and we'll get the show in front of more eyeballs, and more eyeballs means more views, and more views means that I can continue to do this program. For next week's lineup of guests, this recording is a little in advance, so I don't have that scheduled at the date of the recording of this, so please visit dialthegate.com for that information, and the YouTube page will also be loading up those episodes as well. My name is David Reed for Dial the Gate. Thanks again to Robert C. Cooper. Thanks again to my moderating team, Tracy, Keith, Jeremy, Reese, Anthony, Summer, and my production team, Jennifer Kirby, Linda, the Gate Gabber Fury. You guys make the show possible. My name is David Reed for Dial the Gate. We'll see you on the other side.